All right, let's jump right in. When you think World War I, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, right? It's mud, it's trenches, it's this tragic, unending stalemate. But what if I told you that entire picture, that popular image, is almost completely wrong? Today, we're going to see how the Great War was, and this is no exaggeration, the single biggest military revolution in all of history. So, first things first, we've got to tackle this myth head on. The story that we're all told about World War I, in movies, TV shows, even some older history books. It paints this very specific and honestly very misleading picture. This is the classic take, isn't it? A totally senseless meat grinder run by clueless generals, where for 4 long years, absolutely nothing changed except for the horrifying casualty numbers. It's a really powerful image, but you know what? It completely misses what was actually happening on the ground. And here it is, the truth that just flips that whole myth right on its head. Far from being static and unchanging, the war was this incredible pressure cooker of innovation, happening at a speed that was just shocking. What came out of it was a completely new way of fighting that we now call the modern style of warfare.
So, how in the world did this happen? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was like a perfect storm. Three huge paradigm shifts in warfare, all smashed into each other at the exact same time. And in the process, they made almost everything that came before totally obsolete.
Let's just break this down. First, you've got machines taking over for muscle. The internal combustion engine, in trucks and of course tanks, started its hostile takeover of the horse's job. Second, the battlefield literally exploded from a flat two-dimensional map into 3D, with airplanes up above and submarines down below. And third, the whole idea of the battlefield got deeper. Suddenly, with long-range guns and planes, you could hit the enemy miles and miles behind their front lines. Okay, so why the trenches? This perfect storm we're talking about created this terrifying new problem. For a critical moment in time, technology had created a really deadly imbalance on the battlefield. And this right here shows you the core problem perfectly. On one hand, you've got firepower that has taken a massive leap into the future. I mean, machine guns and artillery that could just create this impenetrable wall of lead and steel. But on the other hand, maneuver, mobility, was still stuck in the past, plodding along at the speed of a walking man. So what happens when you try to charge across a field at a machine gun? It was just suicide. The only logical thing to do was to dig a hole and get in it. But hey, people are innovators, right? Especially when our backs are against the wall. The rest of the war became this frantic, desperate race to solve this firepower versus maneuver problem. And the solutions they came up with, they literally forged the foundations of how every army fights today. First up was a total revolution in tactics. The Germans especially pioneered something we now call infiltration tactics. So instead of these giant human waves just crashing against a fortified line, the whole idea was to use small, heavily armed elite squads, these stormtroops, to find the weak spots, punch right through, and just create chaos in the enemy's rear. Now, the key here, and this is so important, is that this wasn't a linear attack anymore. The stormtroops wouldn't waste their time and their lives on every single machine gun nest. No way. They would flow around them, cutting them off from supplies, from communication. Then the regular infantry coming up behind could mop up those now isolated pockets. It was fluid, it was decentralized, and it was devastatingly effective.
And to make these new infantry tactics work, artillery had to completely change its whole philosophy. The old way was just brute force, right? Pound the enemy trenches for weeks on end, trying to literally destroy everything. The new way? It was way smarter. It was all about neutralization, a short, incredibly violent surprise barrage designed to stun and disorient the enemy, creating that critical window of opportunity for the stormtroops to get in and do their work.
This quote from the absolute genius of German artillery, Georg Bruckmüller, just captures this new mindset perfectly. He wasn't trying to level the battlefield. He was trying to shatter the enemy's will to fight. This was a psychological weapon just as much as a physical one. But tactics alone weren't going to cut it. The machine age offered its own brutal solution to the machine gun: the tank. The Allies, especially the British and French, they saw the potential here to finally break the stalemate and get the battlefield moving again. And they went all in, producing thousands of these new iron beasts. I mean, just look at this comparison. It is staggering. The Allies built over 6,500 tanks. The Germans, they built 15. Just 15.
And it's not like they couldn't build more. It was a conscious choice, an institutional bias. The German high command just saw the tank as a clumsy nuisance. They favored their clever tactics over new tech, a decision that would really come back to haunt them. And that same industrial gap was happening in that third dimension, the air. The Allies outproduced Germany in aircraft by nearly 3-1. Now, this wasn't just about raw numbers. It was about capability. The war started with these flimsy little planes used just for spying. It ended with specialized fighters, heavy bombers, and ground attack aircraft, all locked in a desperate battle for control of the skies.
So you get to the end of the war, 1918, and the battlefield is utterly, completely transformed. You've got infiltration tactics, surprise artillery, massed tank assaults, and coordinated air power all coming together. This was not the war of 1914 anymore. This was something brand new. And this, for me, is the single most convincing argument. Think about this time traveler test. If you could magically transport a general from 1914 and drop him into a battle in 1918, he would be completely and totally lost. But if you took a general from late 1918 and dropped him into a battle in 1940 at the start of World War II, he'd get it. He would recognize the basic ideas of what was happening. The concepts were already there.
And that is the absolute key takeaway. Better tanks, faster planes, smarter bombs. They're all, when you get right down to it, just incremental improvements on the revolutionary concepts that were painfully born in the fires of the First World War. 1918 wasn't the end of an old way of war. It was the violent, bloody birth of the new.
And that leaves us with one last crucial question to think about. This new, incredibly lethal and fast-paced modern style of warfare didn't just end the Great War. It became the foundation for the blitzkrieg of World War II, and its echoes have been felt in every major conflict since, right up to this very day.